If you had visited the American South or the desert Southwest in the mid-19th century, you would have found a landscape bordering on uninhabitable. In cities like Houston and New Orleans, temperatures pushed past 100 degrees for weeks at a time, and the thick humidity of the Gulf states carried malaria, yellow fever, and heat stroke. The architecture of the era was built entirely around survival. Houses featured high ceilings to let hot air rise, and deep wraparound porches that shaded the front and sides of the home. These shaded porches became the living room from May through September, as families sat outside waiting for whatever breeze the night might offer. To cope with the heat, there was an entire industry dedicated to cutting blocks of ice from frozen northern lakes during the winter, loading them onto trains and shipping them south. By 1907, the American ice trade was delivering 90 million tons of frozen lake water a year, so families could place ice blocks in front of window fans. This immense physical toll shaped the entire geography of American power. The biggest cities, the wealthiest banks, and the most productive factories all clustered in a narrow band from Boston to Chicago. Between the Civil War and the Second World War, almost every American president came from somewhere in that northern corridor. The South was the losing side of the migration map. People were leaving, not arriving. The heat bent everything around it, where people lived, how they built their homes, and how their economy functioned. It was an environmental barrier that dictated the strict limits of American expansion. A solution to this heat barrier was about to emerge, and it had absolutely nothing to do with human comfort. In the summer of 1902, the Sackett-Wilhelms lithographing plant in Brooklyn was losing money. The color printing process required running the same sheet of paper through the presses multiple times. When the humidity spiked, the thick paper absorbed the moisture from the air, swelled up, and changed size between passes. The colors landed in slightly different positions each time, producing ruined, misaligned batches. To fix it, a heating company sent a 25-year-old engineer named Willis Carrier. His assignment was simple: fix the paper, fix the ink, go home. Carrier designed a system that pushed air across coils filled with cold water. The idea was to cool the air, condense the water vapor out of it, and send dry, temperature-controlled air onto the printing floor. It pulled the moisture out before it could warp the pages. He did not set out to cool a single human being, but his mechanical fix for smudgy ink became the foundation for a $2 trillion global industry that would eventually redraw the entire population map of the United States. Carrier realized that by controlling the moisture content of the air with mechanical precision, temperature control naturally followed. Previous cooling attempts focused solely on temperature, like blowing air over ice. By managing the humidity instead, he could manufacture specific indoor weather conditions. The first industry to truly capitalize on what this machine could do for human beings was Hollywood. In the early 1920s, summer was a dead season for the American movie theater business. Audiences vanished because nobody wanted to sit in a dark, sealed room, packed shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of sweating bodies. That changed on Memorial Day weekend, 1925. Carrier installed his new centrifugal chiller at the Rivoli Theater in Times Square. The audience arrived carrying folding fans, fully expecting the usual sweltering experience. But as the movie played, the fans started dropping into laps one by one. The audience sat in genuine comfort for the first time in summer movie-going history. Within months, theater owners across the country began installing Carrier systems. Marquees that used to advertise the films started prioritizing the refrigerated air. People bought tickets just to sit in a cold room for 2 hours on a 100-degree afternoon. As Americans built a new habit of flooding into air-conditioned theaters to escape the heat, studios noticed their biggest audiences were suddenly showing up between June and August. This consumer behavior laid the exact foundation for the modern summer blockbuster season. The same machine that cooled the Rivoli was soon humming in the basement of the United States Capitol. For 140 years, the legislative calendar had been dictated by the weather. The Senate chamber, built in 1859, had a round glass ceiling that acted like a magnifying glass, turning the room into a greenhouse. Lawmakers worked through the cooler months and deliberately adjourned by June. Between 1928 and 1929, the Carrier Corporation installed its manufactured weather system into the Capitol building. Both the Senate and House chambers received mechanical cooling for the first time. Removing the physical heat barrier meant lawmakers no longer had to flee the city before July. They could safely remain in session through the broiling summer and stretch their legislative work deep into the fall. For most of American history, the government's fiscal year ended on June 30th, the same day Congress traditionally left to avoid the heat. But with air conditioning allowing lawmakers to stay into the autumn, the budget deadline eventually followed them, shifting to September 30th. Every modern September budget crisis and midnight shutdown vote traces back to the moment the Capitol became a year-round workplace. By the 1950s, the technology jumped from government buildings and movie theaters into residential homes. Post-war production ramped up, prices dropped, and affordable window units crossed 1 million annual sales for the first time, allowing middle-class families to cool their own living spaces. This triggered an immediate architectural shift. New suburban developments no longer needed high ceilings, sleeping porches, or cross-ventilation. Homes were built on concrete slabs with lower roofs, sealed tight against the outside air. The culture of the social front porch vanished, replaced by private, air-conditioned interiors. Once the heat was solvable, the southern third of the country opened up. Factory owners in the industrial north, facing high housing costs and harsh winters, could relocate to Texas or Florida, where land was cheap. Millions of northern workers and retirees followed the jobs. From 1950 to 2000, Texas saw a 170. Between 1940 and 1980, the coldest states of the Northeast and the Rust Belt lost 31 electoral college votes, while the warm climate states gained 29. That net swing of 60 electoral votes was driven by the massive movement of people into air-conditioned territory. For nearly a century after the Civil War, the American South was a locked-in, one-party region controlled entirely by Democrats. But the new arrivals, Midwestern retirees, business owners, and white-collar professionals, were generally older, wealthier, and more conservative than the native population. They brought their voting habits with them, fracturing the old political order. Richard Nixon recognized this demographic shift and built his Southern strategy around actively courting this growing population of conservative Sunbelt voters. As the region gained population and seats in the House of Representatives, it became the most valuable political real estate in the country. Ronald Reagan's 1980 presidential campaign capitalized entirely on this new map. He swept the South and the West, relying on a coalition built in states that had been actively adding air-conditioned population for 3 decades. The center of political gravity in the United States slid south. The modern balance of conservative power relies heavily on a coalition of voters living comfortably in places that, before Willis Carrier's machine, would have physically driven them away. The South was not the only place this technology made livable. In the Persian Gulf, where summer temperatures regularly exceed 130 degrees Fahrenheit, entire cities like Dubai have risen out of the sand. These glass metropolises cannot exist without constant mechanical climate control. They are built entirely on 2 foundations: oil money and cold air. This chart shows the sequence of satellite observations tracking the destruction of the ozone layer over Antarctica. In 1974, scientists discovered that chlorofluorocarbons, the chemical compounds used as refrigerants in early air conditioners, were drifting into the upper atmosphere and actively burning away this protective shield. While CFCs were eventually phased out globally, a much larger thermodynamics trap remained. Air conditioning is one of the most energy-intensive technologies on Earth. Every kilowatt-hour used to cool a room requires massive electricity generation and pumps superheated air and emissions directly into the outdoor atmosphere. It is a relentless feedback loop. The more we cool the inside of our buildings, the more we warm the outside atmosphere. And the warmer the outside gets, the more the world demands additional air conditioning. Willis Carrier died in 1950, the very same year that home air conditioning sales crossed 1 million units. He was an engineer trying to stop humidity from ruining a lithograph press in Brooklyn. He simply wanted to fix the ink. Instead, his machine shaped modern American politics, built entire cities in the desert, and altered the climate of the planet itself.